Strictly Sports. I am Jacob Brown. Today, joined with CJ Uri and Stephen Cashin. We're finally going to do a normal episode again. We haven't done those in quite some time. We've been doing a bunch of bonus videos, but today we're going to go over a bunch of stuff. We're going to announce something really cool in just a second, talk about the MJ doc, the NFL draft, and a little bit of controversy here with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. And then later in the show, Stephen's going to give us his draft sleepers of this year's 2020 NFL draft. But before we get going here in some conversation, I want to hand it over to CJ here. You've got a big announcement for us.
Yeah, so if you're an FAU student or FAU athletics fan, or even just a college football, college athletics fan who monitors smaller programs or programs that are up and coming, it's pretty easy to see that FAU athletics is trying their very hardest to go into a new direction and to sustain winning, sustain fans in the seats, and become a traditional winning culture here in Boca Raton. And I think they're doing an amazing job. I've been privileged to speak with Mr. Andy Seeley, who's the Senior Associate Athletics Director for External Relations. He came over here from UCF and saw their dominant years there and was a part of their program success. And he is doing a really good job of conversing with the students as to what they want to see with the athletics program, what's going to keep them at games, how we're going to involve different student organizations and whatnot at the games, and really, in general, create this student section environment that is a force to be reckoned with. And Andy Seeley is doing his absolute best, and I had the privilege of speaking to him recently via Zoom just to talk about where do you see FAU athletics from a student perspective? And he really interviewed me, which I thought was really cool, which just shows that they're giving the voice back to the students here to see what needs to happen with FAU athletics. And he also said he would be honored to come on the Strictly Sports podcast on Thursday to promote some FAU stuff and give us some cool information and whatnot. So I'm pleased to say that Strictly Sports will be having Andy Seeley on the show on Thursday to talk with me, Jacob, and Stephen about FAU athletics in the future for the school.
Oh, man. Well, we can't wait. I mean, all three of us talk about it all the time about stuff we want to see at FAU. And now we get to hear it from, the man himself, the guy with all the answers. So you guys can hear that on all of our platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a bunch more. You can hear that on Thursday here on Strictly Sports. So now let's get into our other conversations here. And let's talk about what the whole world's talking about right now. The Michael Jordan doc, The Last Dance. This has been airing on ESPN throughout this quarantine. They actually pushed up the air date because people were incredibly bored over quarantine. They needed something to do. So ESPN was like, you know what? Let's just release this MJ doc early. It set ratings records. I think 7 million people were watching live consistently on all these episodes. It's crazy how many people are just glued to their screens for this. And I really here's the thing. I was born in 2000. CJ, you're a little bit older than me. Stephen, you too. We didn't really get to watch Michael Jordan play. And I think what this doc provides something like me is you get that perspective. You get, holy crap, Michael Jordan was a god. This guy was on top of the world. He was idolized. He was one of the most mentally tough people, not just sports athletes, but one of the most mentally tough people I've ever seen. He is an absolute winner. He's a grinder. He's a competitor. And quite frankly, it's just making me think now, you know what? He's probably the GOAT. I've spent my whole life, obviously, I've seen LeBron play, and out of just recency bias and based on the only thing that I've ever seen, I've always been like, oh yeah, LeBron's the GOAT, 8 straight finals, everything like that. But you look at Michael Jordan, goes through those tough Pistons teams in the 90s. LeBron ain't doing that. I'm sorry. LeBron's just not doing that. He's just not mentally tough enough. Michael Jordan did things that LeBron wouldn't even dream of. I think that he is idolized like LeBron has not been idolized yet. I mean, you guys have been watching this too. What have been your guys' major takeaways, CJ?
So I have a little bit of a differing opinion on the LeBron Jordan standpoint, but
here we go.
Barring LeBron from the conversation, just talking about Jordan, one of my favorite parts of the documentary so far is, I think it was either episode 1 or episode 2, is the premiere night, and you really just saw Jordan just these highlight reel dunks at UNC, and something that basketball fans that are a little younger, I'd say 24 and younger, don't really appreciate is, they have this mindset of oh, well, the guys from the 90s and the 80s, they weren't even doing all this acrobatic stuff. They weren't
Yeah,
as athletic. It just shows that there were genuinely the same type of athleticism, going on in the league and in college sports at the time. Now, do I think that LeBron couldn't go through the gauntlet of what Jordan did? Who knows? Do I know if Jordan would get through those Golden State Warrior teams,
very good point.
the big three in Boston, those Spurs teams that had Ginobili, Tony Parker, Robinson, Duncan? I mean, who knows? Because this whole debate about a lot of what's going on with this documentary is people aren't enjoying what Jordan did, and instead they're taking it as let me go compare the two now. And I don't know, but one of the biggest takeaways that I've taken from this documentary so far, the two would be the athleticism is almost on point with what we had now with some of the guys, not all of them, but some of them. And it also just shows you how much the league was dominated by big men, and now you have shooters really dominating the league.
Oh yeah.
So it's really cool to see and go back in time to see how physical it was. But yeah, it's just nuts to see what Jordan went through.
Yeah, I mean, to segue off that, I mean, it's the appreciation of like the old school game. Like I never realized how physical the NBA game was back then. Watching, the episode when Jordan had to go play that Pistons team in 89 and 90 and having to struggle to get to finally winning his first championship in 91. Just the dominance of those other teams. You look at the Celtics, the Lakers, Pistons, and all those teams you had to fight through and fight against. The physicality and being mentally tough for MJ, that's what I took away from so far. I'm middle through episode 4 here, and just the ability for him to keep persevering and trying to fight and trying to get that first championship, and how mentally tough he was, leading up through his whole career, and just making everyone around him better. And my favorite part so far was in '86 when his team was 25-50, and they were tanking to go get a better draft pick, and he goes, fuck it, we're gonna make the playoffs. I'm gonna will ourselves to it.
Yeah.
And they told him, they're playing the Pacers. They end up winning by 1. Paxson hits that late game winning shot. And they sat him, and he took him for the team. And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna will his team to the playoffs. They make it. They end up getting swept in that first series, but it just shows you the type of person MJ was and is, and just wanted to win every single time he's on the court. And he said it. I don't care about anything else besides winning, and that's the bottom line. That's what he's made of, and that's why I think he's the best player to come through the game of basketball.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, I mean, Steven's mentioning that was the year when Jordan was on a minutes limit and they wouldn't let him come back on the court for that final minute, on the brink of going to the playoffs. That was just incredible for me to see that an actual NBA franchise was like, no, you need to sit here in the final 14 seconds. I understand it, though. I mean, the Bulls, honestly, they made the right decision. They shouldn't have let him come back at 100%. But that's besides the point. The thing that strikes me, and you both mentioned it, is just the mental toughness of Michael Jordan is crazy. I mean, the way that it proves itself to me is when you see him now and they're asking him these questions again in present day, and he's not walking anything back. He's agreeing with himself 25, 30 years later about, there's some controversial things that have been discussed in this documentary, his gambling, his, bad teammate rumors. He hasn't walked, his hatred for Isaiah Thomas, which I loved. That hasn't gone away. Like he has not walked anything back. He hasn't said, oh, I may have been a little harsh. Maybe I should have been a little nicer. No, he's just like, nah. I mean, Isaiah was a dick and I hate him. And I respect that. You don't need to be this fake personality type of guy. But, just seeing the journey that he had to go through, the teams that he had to go through, there's this narrative going around for LeBron stands that, Jordan didn't face anyone in the finals, but he faced really dominant Eastern conferences. So I wanted to bring up this point too. I was just watching an interview with Colin Cowherd and Charles Barkley, and for anyone who doesn't know, Charles Barkley is one of the most honest people in all of sports media. This dude will say anything about anyone. He was talking about this plot point here in this documentary about Jerry Krause, who was the GM of the Chicago Bulls team, kind of orchestrated it and developed all these players, got them into a group. And there's kind of been this narrative that he broke up the Bulls, but Charles Barkley's saying, nah, he thinks that's a little BS. He thinks it's actually the owner of the Bulls who didn't want to pay all the players. He said right when Mike had to get paid, right when Scottie had to get paid, that's when the owner was just like, nah, I kind of want to split the team up. But as you're seeing in this documentary, he's kind of using Krause as a fall boy. What do you guys think of that, CJ?
I think it's actually really interesting to hear that, because when you watch the first couple episodes, you're like, damn, this Krause guy kind of sucks. Like,
right, yeah.
He didn't pay Scottie Pippen. He tried to really break up the Pippen-Jordan connection. And a lot of times he put business before teammates and friendship. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, it sucks. This guy isn't even alive to defend himself, you know? But then when you hear this talking point, which is really interesting, is maybe it was the owner. And that makes me feel like maybe the owner gave Jerry Krause like specific rules and needed specific things done. I want to save money on this. I only want to pay this guy. This guy's a liability, whatever it is. Holy cow. I don't know. But if we can find out more about that going forward in the documentary, I would be very pleased to know if it really was Jerry Krause. But I think it's really interesting that, someone's coming out and saying, I don't know, I think this was really the owner who did a lot of this stuff, and he's just kind of scapegoating a dead man.
Yeah, and we forgot to mention his name. His name is Jerry Reinsdorf, of course, and he's actually been featured pretty heavily in this documentary, and he's been the most prominent one saying, yep, Krause broke up the Bulls. Yep, Krause broke up the Bulls. He's been saying that like on repeat for the entire documentary. Steven, what do you think about this?
Yeah, there was a portion there last night where I'm like, Krause was the guy that was really fueling that team to kind of, separate itself. The feud with Pippen there, him demanding a trade, and, they were going back and forth at it in between trips, West Coast trips or whatever it was. And, they told them both to, like, simmer it down. And then you get back to, the last season when, Phil Jackson is saying, yep, this is your last season no matter what happens. MJ said, I'm not going to play if I'm not playing under Phil Jackson. And that's just the bottom line. And we don't know how true it is from, the upstairs portion, or the owners telling him, to do this, do that. Who knows? I can't speak on that part, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And it's just, you don't really know for sure what was really going on there. At the end of the day, maybe it was Krause that was breaking up, this team and, trying to send guys in different directions. We truly don't know. But if we do find out it was the owner, telling him what to do and where he wanted to take this Bulls team, then we'll have more clarity on it. But I just don't know what to think as of this moment, though.
Yeah, because I don't want, to bring up this conversation to vindicate Jerry Krause. He's still messed up in a lot of different ways. There's the players themselves are we were kind of offended that he kind of wanted to point to the organization and the system and his choices for why the Bulls were winning, rather than just saying, no, it was the players, and that's why we won championships. The players were always kind of annoyed by that. Why are you, backing your own system and the organization rather than saying, no, it was Michael Pippen and Dennis Rodman that won us these rings?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it too. It's like he said that about the players. He goes, the players don't win you titles. They don't get you where you wanted to be. But if it wasn't for MJ and it wasn't for Scottie, I mean, and you bring Rodman along after you lose those Pistons a few times and you bring him on board, you got that team to mold together. If it wasn't for those three guys, who knows where the Bulls would have been? And that's just to me, that's where they lost me in the not in the documentary, but from his standpoint, dude, you're not the one playing on the court. You're getting these players in. You're making the decisions to, bring this team together. But at the end of the day, it's, Jordan's the one going out there and making the plays, and he's the one molding this team together, and the head coach. They're the ones that are really bringing this whole project together, and that's how they were able to win so many titles there in a row. And they were one of the best dynasties, to come through basketball.
Yeah, CJ, I mean, what are you thinking about this?
So my opinion on that is, when I heard Jerry Krause say that, that was when I sat there and said, yeah, this guy is definitely the reason why, there was drama. Because saying that, especially as the general manager of the team who's dishing out contracts, signing players, talking about trades, it's just, why would you say that? Especially when Jordan is there, Scottie Pippen is there, Rodman, to sit there and say, yeah, well, the organization won the national championship, won the finals, not the players. That's ridiculous because sure you dished out contracts, sure you made sure guys were paid, and sure you orchestrated trades and did the paperwork, but who was on the court?
Exactly.
It's a team effort for sure, but when it's on the court, it's the players.
I mean, I just think about it this way, like if just put yourself in a player's shoes and you're working your ass off, grinding every day, playing almost every day for 6, 7, 8 months at a time, and you're grinding, and then you hear from your GM, oh, it's because of me why we're winning. I'd look at him like, what, man? Like, what are you talking about? I mean, it's just looking for trouble. I just don't understand it.
I could definitely see that there was some jealousy going on with Jerry Krause. I could tell that he wanted to be more in the spotlight, which in a way, yeah. I guess Jerry Krause in today's day and age where we actually do, put general managers and owners in the spotlight more, and we're talking about how great this general manager is and how great blah, blah, blah. A lot of the times now you go on ESPN and Fox Sports and they're talking about the brains behind things and how these guys are saviors for franchises and whatnot. So in today's day and age, if Jerry Krause was to orchestrate this team and start winning again, Jerry Krause would be getting a bunch of media attention. But back then, I don't really think Jerry Krause was getting all that media attention. So I can see where he wants to come out and say, hey, look, I kind of pieced together this team. I made all of this work on paper. But at the end of the day, you don't say that. You don't disgruntle the players. You don't say that, I really won this by assembling this team. You don't do that. That upsets players, especially athletes who a lot of times, have short tempers.
Yeah, I think he was getting frustrated too by the fact that he was getting eclipsed by MJ and Scotty and Rodman, all that firepower there. But we were witnessing at that time, the world was witnessing one of the, a sport icon, really start to revolutionize the game of basketball. I mean, he was the guy. I mean, he was a world icon everywhere he went. Oh, I want to go see MJ. I want to see him there and see him do these great things. He's putting up 63 in a playoff game, things that we have never seen. And I think he was getting mad at the fact that he wasn't getting that limelight, saying, oh, I got these guys to Chicago and now we're winning. But that's just not how it was. MJ was the guy, and he was taking basketball to new heights. And was it fair to say that what he did, was it wrong? Yeah, at the time, he could have said it in more subtle ways, not in the way that it was attacking the players on the court. Because at the end of the day, you're sitting in the press box watching the game, and the players on the court, they're making the game-winning shots, they're making the passes, making the blocks, whatever it is to win you get basketball games on the court. They're providing you, your revenue, your wins, titles, etc. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I'll end this MJ conversation here. I don't know if you guys have gotten to this episode. I completely forget which one it was, but they were talking about the Dream Team at the Olympics. And I think this fully encapsulates what Michael Jordan is. That Dream Team was, insane. You look at the roster of that team, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Scottie Pippen, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone. It's like an entire Hall of Fame roster for that Olympic team. And they were telling a story on that episode that Michael Jordan, they were in practice. First of all, almost every player, when they were interviewed side to side, they were like, those practices are the best thing that I ever experienced in my life. Like, they were literally, Charles Barkley said that in interviews, best thing I've ever experienced in my life. But in one of those practices, Michael was on a team that was losing, and Magic Johnson was talking shit. And right as Magic Johnson started to talk shit, MJ scored every point remaining for the rest of that practice game and beat the other team in practice. And that just shows you that on a team that has all Hall of Famers, he was able to go in, come back from behind, score all the points on his own, and win. That's Michael Jordan. That's all you need to hear about who he is. So now let's move on and talk about some other stuff here. When are sports coming back? That's been the question on all of our minds for quite a while. And I'm just going to start with baseball here because that's kind of been the sport that's had the most rumors. Football's far away. Basketball and hockey have kind of been circulating the same ideas, but baseball seems to be coming out with something different every day. And sometimes it's like multiple different things during a day. So I talked about it on Twitter last night. Last night you had Trevor Plouffe, former big leaguer. He's on a podcast. He's on Talking Baseball on John Boy Media. I absolutely love their podcast. They're the ones that expose the Astros for cheating. And Trevor Plouffe last night came out. He's a co-host there now, and he tweeted, "Guys, I have good news from multiple sources. I'm hearing baseball will be back. July 1 will have opening day. Spring training number 2 will start on June 10." And then an hour later, Trevor Bauer, who's still pitching in the big leagues, comes out and he's like, "Baseball on July 1, checks texts, checks emails." He said he's heard nothing. So you have a retired player saying, "I'm hearing opening day July 1, and teams can play at their home stadiums, just different divisions." And then you have one player saying, "I haven't heard shit." So what do you guys think? I mean, do you think can come back July 1 at a 100-game season, teams playing with no fans at their stadiums, just different divisions? I think that's the way it's going. But how realistic do you guys think that is, CJ?
I saw that yesterday in New York they had was the first day that they had a decline in numbers of COVID-19 cases, which is very positive because at the moment in North America, New York City was probably affected the most by COVID-19, and with the whole ventilators, and they needed to buy more. So I thought that was great news. And within those 24 hours of receiving that news, we're hearing that sports is looking like they're going to finish up their seasons, or baseball is actually going to be able to start. I am not saying that there's people out there that are fearmongers and whatnot. I think that COVID-19 talk on the news is very serious and it is very real. Having said that, I think that there's a lot of negativity going on around sports and how nothing's going to be done, and they should just hang it up and just call it, and just the season should be over, declare a winner, who the hell knows. Look, I'm applauding anyone who has a hand in keeping sports alive and these seasons alive right now. I think that they're going to finish them, and I totally think that July 1st for opening day for MLB is 100% feasible. That's in 2 months.
Yeah.
And the curve is already being flattened. They're finding some medications that are fighting COVID-19 and are good at repelling it. Who knows where we'll be in 2 months? 2 months ago right now, you would have been sitting there saying, "Ooh, I don't know, this COVID-19 is really heating up. There's no cure for it. It's spreading like wildfire." I think that we really got the worst of it, and now we're kind of calming down a little bit. So the fact that they're saying that the start of the season could be out in 2 months from now, I think that's 100% feasible. 8 weeks from now, I think that can happen. Now, whether or not it's with fans for the first month, maybe the first 4 weeks of the MLB season, you just do it without fans.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care either. I mean, I just want baseball at this point. I don't care if there's no fans. I just want to watch anything. I mean, Steven, what do you think, though? I mean, are you trusting Plouffe or are you trusting Bauer?
I'm gonna lean more towards Bauer's side because, like we talked about last night a little bit, once the announcement came out, I was excited. It's a great idea. It's a great plan if you're gonna do it that way. Start spring training June, get back going July 4th weekend. It'd be a great weekend to get baseball rolling. I mean, it's America's best holiday. Be amazing for the game and sports world in general. But I'm gonna stick to Bauer's side, like I said, because he's the one that's he's an active player. So you don't get me wrong. Like, there's guys in the game that they're informed day in and day out. They're having team meetings. They're up there with the GMs, coaching staffs, whatever. They're getting the up-to-date at a moment's notice what's going on. So unless, Plouffe knows something we don't, and he has that insider information, but right now, until we hear an official announcement from the Major League Baseball, we can't really take steps to get there yet. I think there's signs and people are stirring, and they're definitely working something out behind the scenes. Maybe they just don't want to release the plan, so people start making these plans and jumping to conclusions of, oh, we got to get fans in the stadiums.
Yeah,
I think it's baby steps, but they're trending the right direction. And like CJ said, I think it's very, very feasible to get baseball going July 1st.
Yeah, I think what it really is, I think there is something going on. I just don't think Trevor Plouffe knows what that is, maybe. I think Bauer's kind of saying, yeah, we are going to get baseball, but maybe not July 1. So I think that's kind of what's going on here. But I'm really interested to hear what they both have to say. I'm still going to take both sides legitimately. Plouffe's going on a Talking Baseball pod later this week, and Trevor Bauer's actually posting his information on his podcast sometime on Thursday. And if you're a baseball fan, just real quickly, I'll plug this. We recorded season previews for all 30 Major League Baseball teams. So if you are a baseball fan and you need stuff to binge, we've got 30 pods for you. And they're really in detail. We go over everything. Steven and I did those, and hope you can enjoy those. So now we talk about the other sports and their plans. So Steven and CJ, you guys have been much more up to date with this stuff than I have. From what I understand, I think the NHL is saying we're going to have the regular season conclude, then we're going to go into playoffs, pushing the regular season for next year back to December. But then they're saying we're still going to play an 82-game season next year too, which to me that doesn't make sense. So how are you guys circulating through these thoughts about the NHL?
I mean, I think it's totally fine for the NHL to say that they'll still be playing an 82-game season if they start December 1st. I mean, sure, that's 2 months late, but when you really think about it, they're just starting 12 games late, around 12 to 14 games late, which isn't that big of a deal. It'll be a shortened offseason again, coming around like for the 2021 regular season to start.
Yeah,
like the following year, which is fine. It'll be like they'll get like 7 weeks less of an off season, which isn't even that big of a deal. I think that you got to do your very best to get order back to hockey and to the NBA and whoever else. And I think the best way to do it is, hey, we'll start December 1st. Hey, we'll start mid-November, and then we will start the following season when we normally start it.
Yeah.
So yes. I think it's totally for anybody that sit here and actually say to me that the NHL, first of all, if the NHL could start today and finish out their season, they would start October 1st like they normally do anyway. Because I'm a firm believer in NCAA football and NFL football is going to be with fans in the stadium in mid-September. So by that point, if there's NFL fans in the stadium, then NHL could do it too. But it's all going to happen. It all depends on if they finish the season. Because if they finish the season, then they have to give the players a proper offseason, and then they're going to have to start the season late. And I'm totally cool with starting hockey around December and just playing out the next season and then starting the following season on time. It's the only way you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take concessions at this point. There's just not going to be a way where everything's going to perfectly work out. One thing that I'm concerned with about that, shorter delay between seasons, the shorter off season, that brings me injury concerns. I mean, you've got guys that have certain workout plans and regimens and diets, and if their off seasons are shortened, that kind of worries me in terms of injuries, especially because hockey, let's face it, it's the toughest sport out there. That and football, you get hit hard. You've got to, play every day on your skates. It's a hard sport. I mean, Steven, you played, what would that be like, taking that much time off of an off season?
Yeah, it's a concern that I've thought about, really in the last few days, thinking about how if they really try to go stretch the season out as far as they can, and then you're having, let's say, maybe a month to recover. Think about it. The Stanley Cup playoffs, you're putting your body on the line. These guys, their livelihoods in hockey is to win the Stanley Cup, and that's the bottom line. They work their whole careers off to get to that point and win that trophy. And guys are laying their bodies on the line, breaking bones. We saw Char last year, broken jaw. I mean, guys are breaking ankles, whatever it is. And then they go in the offseason and they recover and they're back the next season. So you go through this whole Stanley Cup run this year, and now you have to jump back in December. Let's say the season ends September, November area. If they drag this thing out the farthest they can, start the season in December, you have a few weeks off, you're going to see a lot of guys missing some key time because they're really laying it out there for their team, sacrificing the body, and there's not enough time for you to recover if you have surgeries to repair certain things, and you might see some guys miss some considerable time. But I will say this about the NHL. I applaud them for doing everything they can to try to salvage this season and do everything they can to finish the regular season. I think that's their main goal, is to get these games played so that they give everyone a fair shot of their piece of the playoffs. And like teams like the Panthers and the Rangers, there's no controversy. They keep the integrity of the game in the playoffs. and we move on. So I applaud them for that, and they're keeping everyone's hopes up.
Something that people are not also factoring in is these players have had about 8 straight weeks of no contact.
Yeah,
And
really good point.
if anyone had any injuries going into quarantine, they do not have them anymore for the most part. These people, they've got a mini offseason within the season to completely rest up. So when the league comes back, these guys are going to be 100% healthy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, maybe this offseason it's not going to be continuous, but you're still making that time up in this little hiatus that we have right now. So yeah, it's not like a straight through, you get 3 months off. It's just 8 weeks here, play another, whatever it is, month and a half, 2 months, take another 2 months off, and then we're going to play a shortened, a season, with a shorter break in between. And, NBA, they've kind of been a little muddy about what they want to do. I think, they've had that Vegas plan out there. They've had kind of the same ideas that the NHL has. We've mentioned it multiple times. I mean, the good thing the NBA has about themselves, they don't have to worry about respecting the playoff format. The next closest team out of the 8 seed is like 5-6 games out, so no one's complaining if they keep the 9 seed from getting a chance to make the playoffs. They could just do it right now, start the playoffs, they'd be fine. So NBA, there's really not much to talk about, but I think as long as some of these sports, you get NHL back, let's say, right around when baseball is, I'm thinking that's probably realistic, mid-June, early July. You're talking regular season probably finishes, I don't know, probably early August, or not early August, sorry, probably early July, mid-July, and then the playoffs would probably go into late August, early September, leaving you probably like 2 months for an off season, which is only a month less. So it's really not that bad. They just have to hope that this timeline continues. That's really the most important part. So we're going to move on here and talk about some NFL stuff, because this has just been running constantly through my head ever since the NFL draft. I've been thinking about all these teams, who's a sleeper team, who's going to really fall down this year. And then I'm really thinking about some of these controversies too, mainly in Green Bay right now. And CJ, you went off a little bit last week about this. And, I know Jensen Jennings in our group chat, big Packer fan, he doesn't really get it either. Why did the Packers draft Jordan Love when they've got Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback right now?
I think they drafted Jordan Love to send Aaron Rodgers a message saying that this is our, this isn't your franchise, this is our franchise. We're the people making the decisions. Two things that don't make sense. One off the bat, a little bit more of a minor thing, but still to me makes absolutely no sense, because I haven't heard really anything from the GM of the Packers. Why in the hell did they have to trade up to 26? Because the Dolphins had the 26th pick, who already picked a quarterback round 1, and then the teams after them all have franchise quarterbacks.
Yeah.
No one was taking Jordan Love. You could have had him at 30. But thank you for trading up, because you gave me a 4th-round pick when you could have kept that 4th-round pick. Made absolutely no sense. And I'm just going to leave it at this. I feel genuinely bad for Aaron Rodgers. They could have added a starting wide receiver. They could have added a starting outside linebacker, somebody that's going to get the defense off the field, get a stop, someone that's going to make a big catch for Aaron Rodgers. They could have added a real starter at 30, because there were or 26, because there were some damn good players left on the board. Guys that could be difference makers in those games against 49ers, games against the Seattle Seahawks. But guess what? They decided to get a freaking quarterback that's not going to play for 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm pissed. The San Francisco 49ers added 2 or 3 starters in this draft. The Packers did not add a feasible starter within the first 2 rounds. Terrible, horrific draft. And Aaron Rodgers, if I were you, I'd be pissed. And now, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers' future with Green Bay is a little hazy. I don't know if he finishes his career there. It's going to be a similar situation to Tom Brady. Tom Brady's going to end his career. Tom Brady at the end of his Patriots career, what the hell do I have to work with on this team? No one. No one. Literally no one. So that Aaron Rodgers is going to probably hit free agency at the very end of his career and be like, wow, I can go to a team that's got like 4 different weapons on offense and take a 2-year contract and just finish out my season there, maybe win a ring. That's not good. That's not a good look for the Packers.
Yeah, and I look at this Packers team, and I dive into their, last season. We talked about it on our post-draft pod. This team went 13-3. They lost 4 games throughout the course of the season. 2 of them to the 49ers. First game in Week 12, they lost 37-8 at San Francisco. They go back there again in the conference championship game, lost 37-20. That's the team you need to get over the hump. That's the team you have to beat to get to the Super Bowl. And they got absolutely manhandled. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't stop San Francisco. They need pieces. They needed to go get someone in this draft. And like CJ said, they go and get a quarterback that's not going to play for 2-3 years down the road. And you left a ton of potential, a ton of talent out there in that draft board to go get yourself a guy on defense, a guy up front who can really out physical guys. Because that's what I saw in that 49er games is they just got outmanned, got out physical, got out worked in every asset of the game. And for Aaron Rodgers, if you're looking at this team, you're going, I need one piece to get me to over the top. Give me some weapons that can get me there to the promised land so I can give myself a couple more chances to get a Super Bowl title again. And I look at guys like, you look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who came off from LSU, went to the Chiefs. Look at T. Higgins. I go down a ton of talent that they left on the board, and they really left themselves out to dry. I think this is just a way out for Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to stay there. He's going to want to go somewhere, like CJ said, like Tom did, and came to Tampa with weapons, and he can win in a window of 2 years and ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about those games, the thing that jumped out to me was the scores. You're giving up a lot of points, and people haven't even mentioned they lost a lot of their linebackers. They lost one of their linebackers to the Giants, Blake Martinez. He was a tackle machine, and now he's gone. And that's a problem. They don't have a great secondary. Their linebackers are gone. Can you name a defensive end on this team? Can you name their pass rush? I don't see it. Their defense is not good. And it's so frustrating too, because they did such a good job over the last few seasons building it up. Specifically, they went through the draft. They went through free agency. Last season, everyone praised them because they paid for 4 free agent defensive guys, and it didn't work. And now they're really biting it. And, I think one major point here, and I want to ask you about this, CJ, because, I think you'd have an interesting take on it. The Packers were outgained last year as a 13-3 team. I mean, how do you get to the NFC Championship and you're outgained? That's like almost impossible. But, what is your take on A, their defense losing a lot of guys, and B, the fact that they were outgained?
I feel like, wow. I feel like a lot of it came down to we're going to ride Aaron Rodgers' magic until it just can't produce anymore and save some money on some weapons, really, because they didn't really add much to the team. Now, I really like the dual-headed running back system that they got in Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. I think that is really top 5 in the league in terms of a dual-headed monster in the running back, the backfield. Devontae Adams out wide, he got hurt. He was hurt a little bit. But outside of those 3 guys, I mean, what else do you have on that offense? Jimmy Graham's been washed for a while. Valdez-Scantling isn't that great. Alan Lazard isn't that great either. The offensive line is just getting older. Aaron Rodgers is constantly put on his ass. It's just not good. And I think that the stats matter here. Take Aaron Rodgers off this football team, and they're a sub-500 football team. Yeah. And there are some teams around the league that, you could take a quarterback off the team and replace him with someone of his talents or slightly below his talents, and they're still a good team. For example, the San Francisco 49ers. If you take Jimmy Garoppolo off that team and put someone that's slightly less good at football, they're still a playoff team. And, you can say that for a few other teams around the league where you're like, you take this guy off and they're still probably in the playoffs. And that's not the case with the Green Bay Packers at all. And the stats show they were outgained last year. Why? Because the offense is stagnant. And if Aaron Rodgers isn't producing unreal magic from his fingertips, then they're not a good football team. And it stinks because now they've upset the one guy that's getting them in the playoffs. Yeah, I didn't see any good free agency signings from them anyway. What I did see was Brian Bulaga leave the Green Bay Packers O-line to go sign with Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, I mean they gave away their best left tackle. I mean, it's just like, what are you doing? Like, everything that they could do to help out Aaron Rodgers, they did the opposite. Guys, I kind of want to play devil's advocate here a little bit. What about Russell Wilson? Because he doesn't have any weapons. He doesn't have an O-line. His defense is mediocre, but he goes to the playoffs every single year with basically no weapons. And he creates weapons. Like Jacob Hollister last year, the tight end, He was like a third string backup in New England, comes to Seattle and becomes a tight end one. So I look at Rodgers too at the same time, and it's like you should be able to do stuff with a little bit, with not very much. And then you look at Rodgers' weapons compared to Wilson's. Rodgers has a top 5 receiver. Russell Wilson is nobody even at the level close to Devontae Adams. So I look at it and I say, Russell Wilson's over here not complaining at all and just winning and shutting up. And Aaron Rodgers is over here whining about having no weapons. What is your guys' take on that?
Well, I think Russell Wilson gets to throw to DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett's got Chris Carson in the backfield.
Yeah, but
I think he's just got a better coach.
Devontae Adams.
Yeah, but I just think that the Seahawks have a better coach and a better defense. I think that the culture there is better as an organization. Like the Seahawks have never had drama, and they don't have much drama really at all. Their defense is always elite. It might not be what it was, but it's still elite. They still put a heavy emphasis on making sure that there's a good defense to back up Russell Wilson in the offense. And what did they do last year? They traded up, or I don't even remember if they traded up or not. But they made sure that they were in position to get DK Metcalf, who was probably the best young wide receiver in the league last year, to pair him up with Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf, downfield threat. Tyler Lockett is a shorter route, faster guy. So I give me DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson, and Pete Carroll over LaFleur, Devontae Adams, and then Aaron Jones any day of the week, because that the team identity is there, the culture is there, and the defense is there. I don't think the Packers have much of a defense. Now, I do agree on the offensive side of the ball. They're very similar situations, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. But the thing about Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers is who's the one calling the damn plays? Who's the one that's getting the huddle together? Pete Carroll. Those players want to play for Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's the ultimate players coach ever. And Matt LaFleur isn't that. And Matt LaFleur, I am afraid, he's becoming a little bit more of a puppet to the Green Bay Packers' front office. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers really ever had a connection, and I think Aaron Rodgers is a little bit of a diva, sorta, not fully. I think he's a little bit of a diva, and I think that he kind of wrote off the relationship that he could have had with LaFleur from the get-go.
Well, what are your thoughts on that, Steven?
Yeah, so like kind of top that one off. It's like the coaching staff in Seattle, like you said, it's a coaching staff you want to play for. Pete Carroll, you're not afraid to make a mistake. You want to go out in there and lay it on the line for that guy. And the defense on Seattle side keeps them in games. How many times do you watch Russell Wilson, that Seahawks team, and they're down by multiple possessions? Not very many. And this Packers team, when they lost their games this year, they lost by double digits, and they were trailing significantly, and they couldn't keep up. Seattle, they give Russell Wilson a chance to win every game, late, whether it's one possession, give him the ball last, give him whatever opportunity is to win last second. So that's where I think they have the edge on the Packers is, when you have a defense you can rely on and get you stops, that's what keeps you in ball games. That's what wins you championships is defense. And the Packers are a long way away to rebuild that defense and get to where they want to be. To top it off, that with the Packers conversation is, who they go and draft. They didn't go and get anyone on defense besides Kamal Martin from Minnesota, that linebacker. The best picks they made were in the 5th, 6th round when they got an offensive line from Michigan as well. So in your first 3 rounds, you really missed on really things you needed to get. In the first, they went and got A.J. Dillon and tight end Joshua Degura from Cincinnati. Not too many, weapons on the offensive side when you could have really hit home on the defense, which is struggling against a powerhouse like San Francisco to get you to a Super Bowl appearance. So that's just my take on those two comparisons there.
And one quick little thing here. I just got a live update here. Joe Girardi, manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, said he has, quote, heard chatter about what Trevor Plouffe was saying. And if you forget what he said, Trevor Plouffe is the one that said opening day could be here by July 1. So now that I'm hearing a major league manager say it, it definitely has much more stock, and I'm way more willing to believe it. And I'll just leave that at that. But now we've reached this part of the show. Steven, you were talking to us before the show. You've got some sleeper draft picks here from some teams, some people aren't talking about here.
Yeah, I was, kind of like going through last night. I had my mind spinning off of the Jordan Love thing and guys who were, I think, undervalued on certain teams. And I was looking at the Bills, and they kind of made some interesting picks, throughout the draft. Obviously, Jake Fromm slipped all the way down. I think he's going to be a solid backup for that Bills team, but we know enough about Jake Fromm. But another pick they had was Gabriel Davis from UCF,
All right.
that wideout. He might not be a starter right away, but I was looking at his numbers. A few years at UCF. His first season he had 815 yards, 15 and a half yards average per reception, 7 touchdowns. Second year, 1,200 yards and 17 and a half average reception and 12 touchdowns. So a guy who can really be a weapon on that outside for them, maybe be a backup to start out, maybe for a couple years, like a Chris Godwin kind of type wideout, and then really bloom into a starter. So I look at this Bills team, they did a really nice job adding some pieces. And then AJ Espensa, defensive end, could have been up there, early in the draft. But, he had 49 tackles, 11 and a half sacks in his junior year at Iowa. So look at this Bills team. They did a lot of things, a lot of guys that kind of undervalued there. And then I move on to the Dolphins. A guy who I liked a lot was Curtis Weaver, the defensive end. They got him in round 5. We talked about before the show, a guy who they could have really gotten in the second, third round, slipped all the way to 5. I think he's going to be a steal. I mean, he's at double digits tackles for loss in his last 3 years at Boise. He had 13 and a half sacks, 9 and a half, and 11 and a half at Boise. So a guy who's a bulldog on that defensive line, paired up with Christian Wilkins, Shaq Lawson, that Miami defensive line could be really stellar, this season, and talk about a team that could really be in position to put themselves in that extra, wild card spot. I don't know if you all want to touch on some of this, but I think the Dolphins could be a team to reckon with that defensive line if, Weaver really blooms into a guy that they can pair up with these guys in the line. So those are some guys so far that I see could be, potential breakout guys. And I look at another guy, our guy, Harrison Bryant from FAU.
Oh, yeah.
His stats last year, he really became the guy at FAU, 1,000 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. A guy who can really move guys out of the way. He's a good blocker downfield, quick enough to get open. And I think he was rated top 5, one of the most undervalued guys in the NFL draft because no one, everyone thinks, oh, it's FAU, you play weaker opponents. But he's going to be a guy that really bolsters that an NFL roster, can be a guy sneaky in the flat, get you third down yardage enough. But those are some of my guys so far. And my last player I have is a guy from Navy that the Dolphins picked, Malcolm Perry, 7th round pick. No one might not hear of him, but I'll jumble off some of his stats here. But I'm a Navy fan, seen him for 3 years, a guy that no one saw coming, could be a good slot back. He was slated to be a running back at Navy, ended up being a starting quarterback there. He rushed for 1,000 yards in his last 3 seasons at Navy. He had 2,000 yards his last season, second season 1,087, and 1,082 in his first year at Navy. 21 touchdowns this last season. Quick, shifty guy, versatile, makes guys miss. I'm glad to see Miami gave him a shot. And if you give this guy a glimpse of the NFL and you give him an opportunity out there, he'll make the most of it. And I saw that for 3 years at Navy, and Miami definitely got a good one there. And if you give him a glimpse of hope, I was seeing some comparisons to Julian Edelman. If they bulk him up just a little bit, and quick, shifty guy. But that's that's one guy I think everyone overlooked in the whole draft. But obviously coming from a Navy type offense, you don't hear about him too much. But those are some of my picks for that I think are very undervalued so far in this off season.
Yeah, man. I mean, you hit it on the head with all those. I mean, you've got teams in there that, first of all, I mean, the Bills and the Dolphins. I think you're talking about the top 2 teams in the AFC East, and they've added to their rosters. I think that especially like you mentioned with that third wild card spot opening, you can look at a team like the Miami Dolphins realistically and say, listen, with the work that you've done on your roster, I look at their defense. You have like 2 of everything: 2 corners, 2 edge guys, 2 linebackers, 2 safety. I mean, they have everything. They have 2 running backs, multiple receivers. They've got 2 quarterbacks now, multiple options at multiple positions on the O-line. I love their culture in Miami. And they get a steal in Curtis Weaver to put on the edge. They get their safety. They get their third corner on their nickel corner, like you said, CJ. They didn't have one, and then they got one, and they really got a good value pick there. So I'm looking at both of these teams. I think they're 1-2 in the AFC East. They drafted incredibly well. And then, you mentioned the receiver with Buffalo. I think another point to add on to that too, he's going to get to sit under Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley. These are pros, and those are three great guys to kind of sit under and learn from. CJ, what are you thinking about the drafts from the Bills and the Dolphins?
I think the Bills are already a ready-made playoff team just going into this year. I like the defense. I like the strides that Josh Allen took. Obviously, as a Dolphins fan, I don't want to see them win. But from a neutral perspective here, I see the Bills being an 11-5, 10-6 team. They're that good. I think they're going to run through the AFC East in terms of the Jets and the Pats. I think they're going to split with the Dolphins. I think the Bills are just that good this year. Their defense is insane. And you got to also factor in later in the year, if they're getting any teams that aren't used to a cold environment, that Buffalo Bills stadium is insanely cold.
Snowy.
And they have some rowdy fans. Might be the best fans in the league when it comes to a cold weather game. Those people are nuts. They're absolutely nuts. So I like what the Bills are doing as an organization. They're putting out a really talented roster, and finally they have a downfield threat for Josh Allen to throw to. I'm a firm believer if Josh Allen would have had Stephon Diggs in that playoff game against Houston, that was a Bills win, in my opinion.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If anyone wants to watch some good film on where the Bills really are as a team and an organization, go back to the Thanksgiving game against Dallas. They went into Dallas and marched on into their stadium on the Dallas Cowboys' Thanksgiving game, which that game is a staple. The Dallas Cowboys organization, and they stomped on Jerry Jones' team. Buffalo Bills are good, and I think next year they're going to be right back into a playoff spot, and which is really good for the AFC East, that the AFC East is going to have teams like the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills really emerge as playoff contenders every year, and it's not just the Pats. Now, here's something I want to say about another team in the AFC East, the New York Jets. I think the New York Jets are actually doing some good stuff with their roster, but here's the problem. When you have Adam Gase as a head coach, A, none of those guys want to play for him. B, he doesn't have culture. C, you're not winning with Adam Gase. So I don't have the Jets really as more than a 6-10 team, 7-9, and then Adam Gase is going to be out, fired. Sam Darnold's going to have a new head coach, and then maybe they can get in the right direction. Who knows?
I was actually going to bring that up to you. There was actually this quote from Dan Orlovsky about Sam Darnold, because there's been really unfair pushback on Sam Darnold. And I'll just read the quote. He said, "Last year, in the midst of a new head coach, the second one in 2 years, and a new general manager, a new offense, he was 7-6 as their starting quarterback with his illness that he dealt with last year. Last year, you know who had the worst pass blocking offensive line in football? Sam Darnold. You know who had the worst run blocking offensive line in football? The New York Jets. You're talking about a quarterback that has to do it on his own. 7-6 last season. His leading receiver outside of Jamison Crowder was a tailback. I mean, seriously, guys, you look at Sam Darnold. This guy was over 500 with a terrible team and a bad head coach, and he's only 23 years old with a great arm. I'm really optimistic about Sam Darnold. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think you just got to build around him. I mean, I've watched, glimpses of hope for that team, and just running for his life there. I was watching I believe it was the New England game, Monday Night Football, and he threw a few picks there in that game, but he was running for his life the whole time. I mean, when you're constantly running to your left, scrumming to your right, and you can't have a set design playbook where you can just dish it to guys left and right, then you're not going to be successful. It happened with Jameis in Tampa too. He threw a ton of picks, but was running for his life half the time. So you give Sam Darnold some protection and you give him some weapons to work with. I think he's going to be great because he can do it. He has a good enough arm. He's a smart guy. So you give him, and he won games, like you said, he was above 500. So you give him some sort of consistency on that team, that line, you're in good hands over there.
I was a little surprised that the Jets didn't go best wide receiver on the board at their pick, but I do like Mekhi Becton.
They needed the O-line, yeah.
Yeah, you needed O-line there, so I don't mind. For the New York Jets, I like Sam Darnold. I actually do. I think he's got a lot of potential, but the problem is the Jets have put him in really bad positions 2 straight years, and they really need to figure out a way in which Sam Darnold's going to have a clean pocket, but here's the problem. I think they're going to give him a much more clean pocket this year, which congrats Sam Darnold, you're going to have some time, but who are you throwing to? Nothing good.
Well,
so
I will say they drafted Denzel Mims. They signed Brashad Perriman from Tampa. They did let Robbie Anderson walk. but they have 2 receivers in Le'Veon Bell, so it's not like they have no weapons. And they also just signed Frank Gore today. But continue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like for wide receivers, they've got average. Like they've got a Denzel Mims who has a high ceiling, but he's coming in as a rookie. Perriman is just average, above average, maybe. I'm saying they have some average, at best at this moment, wide receivers, and then yes, they've got an elite running back. But we'll see. Sam Darnold this year is definitely going to have a much better season than last year. That's why I'm going to have them around 7-9, 8-8.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've covered everything here today, guys. We've talked about a bunch of stuff. We just hit the hour mark, which is basically how long we push these. But I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast today. You can listen to all of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a bunch of other platforms as well. Well, actually currently in the process of getting on iHeartRadio. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but we're really trying to get on there. Be a pretty big deal if it happens. And please, guys, if you go to FAU, you're an FAU sports fan, and like CJ said, if you're just a casual football or college football fan, tune into our pod on Thursday. We're going to be talking to Andy Seeley in an exclusive interview here on Strictly Sports. We're going to ask him a ton of questions about the future of FAU, about college athletics, and a bunch of other stuff as well. So for this edition of Strictly Sports, that's CJ Uri, and for Stephen Cash, and I'm Jacob Brown, and we will see you on Thursday.